Thank you very much for coming, everybody. We are going to get started. Good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just have some messages coming in. So thank you very much. What a great day for us to be gathered here. On behalf of our partners with the Nova Scotia Community College and ourselves at the Cape Breton Partnership, we'd like to thank you all for coming today. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Martel, and I'm the Director of Communications with the Cape Breton Partnership. I'd sincerely like to respectfully acknowledge that today we are gathered virtually and in some cases in person across Mi'kma'ki and certainly here in Unama'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people since time immemorial. We would like to sincerely thank our friends and partners in our various Mi'kmaq communities for sharing their land with us and for thank you for always partnering with us. Particularly, we would definitely like to thank our partners with Eskazoni, Membertou, Wagmatcook, Wagoma, the municipalities and the counties of Inverness, Richmond, Victoria, and the town of Port Hawkesbury, as well as the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. Without these partners, days like today would not be possible. So thank you very much for continuing to make these kind of opportunities successful. Obviously, today we're here to go over our third installment of the Ocean Farming Series. Before we get started, I want to give a small technical briefing so folks aren't too jarred or confused. I'm sure most are very used to this virtual platform that we're on. So today we're using Zoom, specifically a webinar platform. Basically what that means is that those who are speaking today for you will be able to be seen and heard. They'll be able to share the screen. And you at home don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry if you need to get up, if you need to stretch, if you need to grab a drink. It's 1:05. If you need to get some lunch, please feel free to do so. We won't see or hear you, so feel free at any time to get up and move around. If you have any questions today during our presentations, we will be holding them till the end of the session. You'll see at the bottom of the screen a Q&A button. If you click that, you'll be able to ask questions at any time. There's also a chat function if you have any questions or concerns or something isn't going right or you're not hearing us. Please feel free to send a message in the chat and we'll be monitoring that as well. And we'll attempt to get things fixed. With that, I think I've covered off. Apologies, my computer is in fact jumping up and down, so apologies that I do seem to be vibrating. I am quite excited though to introduce today's topic, so maybe that is also why I'm very energetic and moving. We're very appreciative today for each of today's presenters that come to us from the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia, Sustain Aqua, and Louisbourg Seafoods, Cape Breton Bivalve. As you all know by now, this being the third session of our ocean farming series, this session is Pathways to Entry and Regulation. To get today's session started, I'm very happy to introduce today's moderator, Nathaniel Feindel. He is the manager of aquaculture development and marine plants harvesting for the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Nathaniel was introduced to the industry during his undergraduate degree at St. Francis Xavier University, here locally in eastern Nova Scotia. From there, he worked with the industry on a salmon farm, getting direct hands-on experience and learning all the different aspects of a large-scale marine farming operation. And from there, he expanded his knowledge of the industry by moving into research in land-based facilities and marine operations for both private companies, universities, and the federal government. He obtained his master's in biology with a specialization in aquaculture from the University of New Brunswick, with the main focus being in fish physiology. Try to say that 10 times fast. Over the years, his experience broadened out and ranged from nutrition trials, spawning, environmental interaction, and technical development, just to name a few. Nathaniel has always been interested in development and the aquaculture industry, has always maintained his interest with it being so diverse. Nathaniel is from Nova Scotia, was very happy to return to the province and work in the industry that he has developed a passion for and contribute to its development in a meaningful way. He is based out of Shelburne and has been with the department since 2015, working with industry and stakeholders to develop aquaculture and marine plants industry here in Nova Scotia. Oh, wow, someone that is very, very well suited to moderate today's panel. So Nathaniel, I welcome you up to the podium to introduce yourself. There we are.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. So, hi everyone. As Jeremy said, Nathaniel Feindel, I'm manager of aquaculture development and marine plants harvesting for the province. I'm based out of Shelburne, and I am excited to be a part of this panel today. Got a great lineup for you, and really fitting as this one is part of one of my main roles and my group's roles is the pathways to entry and regulations with aquaculture in Nova Scotia, and we enjoy working with the industry, and you'll start with our department as the main regulator and work with our group to gain the info of where you have to go, what you have to do, and what policies and regulations are pertinent to what type of farming you're interested in pursuing within the province. So as Jeremy said, I've been with the department since about 2015, and that's about the same time as our first presenter joined the Aquaculture Association. So I'll introduce Tom. I'm very familiar with Tom, and we have discussions about everything aquaculture. But Tom is our first presenter. He's the executive director of the Aquaculture Association. Been with the department or the association since about 2015. Tom graduated from Dalhousie University, and his knowledge of Atlantic Canada and rural Nova Scotia is extensive, having served as the CEO of Just Us Coffee Roasters, VP Food Division and of Co-op Atlantic, as well as Vice President Retail for Atlantic Wholesalers, a division of Loblaws, with responsibility for retail and food operations throughout Atlantic Canada. He has held senior leadership positions with the corporations and corporate and cooperatives in Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Western Canada, and his work on the international front with producers, traders, and exporters has taken him to many locales and in the developing South, in addition to his work connecting producers and retailers and distributors in North America. Throughout Tom's career, he's been active in policy development, economic development, planning in Nova Scotia, and has worked with and advised businesses, government, and the agri-food sector, in addition to infrastructure planning and rural and economic development initiatives. He currently sits on the board of directors of the Nova Scotia Seafood Sector Council, Atlantic Canada Seafood Council, and the Canadian Aquaculture Industry Alliance, also known as CAIA. And in the past, is a past board member of the IWK Children's Hospital and the Neptune Theatre. Tom's currently advises the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture as a member of the Nova Scotia Aquaculture Advisory Committee, the Farm Management Planning Committee, and sits on the Nova Scotia Salmon Traceability Committee. So most of you are probably familiar with Tom, but if you aren't, you'll become quickly familiar with him, and should definitely reach out to Tom if you're interested in farming within the province. So I'm going to hand it over to Tom for his presentation and some words on the industry in Nova Scotia.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Hopefully this is working, and you can see me, and I'm going to try to share my screen in a second. First of all, thanks to the Cape Breton Partnership and all of their partners for inviting me. Thrilled to be here. Very interested in speaking about aquaculture in the province, aquaculture development. And I can start out by saying that the one thing that will be evident as I go through the presentation, the amount of high interest in aquaculture development in Cape Breton is outstanding, and there's a lot of aquaculture going on. Now, mind you, it may not be the same level of interest as Cape Breton being promoted as the number 10 honeymoon spot in North America, but it's still aquaculture has still got a high level of interest. So I'm going to try to see if this works, and hopefully someone will be able to tell me if I can get a thumbs up that you can actually see my screen.
Your presentation is up. We see you, we hear you, and it looks great.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for the invitation again. What I'd like to talk about today is just pathways to regulations, pathways to entry, some of the struggles, some of the highlights of aquaculture development in the province of Nova Scotia. I'm going to start out with a little bit of a heads up on what the Aquaculture Association is doing, and I'm just wondering. There we go. So the ANS is the acronym for the Aquaculture Association. We're not-for-profit trade industry, 15 board members. And the interesting thing about our board, and I'll show you a map later on about the amount of aquaculture that's going around the province. It is right around the province, from Yarmouth to Cape North, and all points in between. And that's basically the same as the makeup of our board of directors. They're geographically based and sector based around the province. We also have 2 science advisors that advise our board on science related issues, on development issues, and we're thrilled to have those folks on as well. Currently, we represent, and we're proud of this, that we represent more than 95% of all finfish, shellfish, and sea plants farming going on in the province of Nova Scotia. And for those of you that may not be familiar, finfish would be made up of species like salmon, trout, striped bass, shellfish. I think everyone is very comfortable with oysters, mussels, clams, quahogs, scallops, and an emerging sea plant business that we'll talk a little bit about today that is really moving along with developments in cultivated sugar kelp. We have more than 160 members of the association, represented by farmers, by suppliers. We have 8 First Nations communities that are members of the association, and we provide resources to all of those, to all of our members. Our mission is to support the production of quality farm seafood in the cool, clean waters of Nova Scotia, creating wealth based on a renewable resource. And I put that up all of the time whenever I make presentations. So that is really our fundamental mission. I want to share with you that in the last year and a bit, we've been developing a strategic plan for aquaculture farming in Nova Scotia, and really out of 3 key pillars. Telling our story. So telling our story is really identifying and sharing the Nova Scotia aquaculture story, developing a communications plan, which we're actively engaged in right now, to get the word out about aquaculture farming and proactively communicate with one voice. We want to make sure that we're consistent and aggressive in talking about the advantages that aquaculture is bringing to Nova Scotians and Nova Scotia right around the province. The second pillar is around labor. I don't think there's probably anybody on this call or on this video that is not going to recognize that resource-based industries in Nova Scotia, particularly for rural and coastal communities, and for those of you that you would know that aquaculture and fisheries are largely based in rural and coastal communities around Nova Scotia. So increasing youth engagement is certainly a goal of our strategic plan, getting young people excited about the opportunities of joining a really vibrant workforce in the farm seafood sector, and attracting skilled labor from out of province. And I'll draw your attention to the new immigration plan that is being developed by the province of Nova Scotia for permanent resident status for immigrants coming into Nova Scotia. And we believe that communicating the opportunities in aquaculture farming is going to be a great landing spot for people coming to the province. Finally, the last pillar is around collaboration, whether it's with organizations like the Cape Breton Partnership, but certainly working to assist government, industry to provide a process to achieve increased application approvals. That's what we're going to talk about today, and also to create opportunities for joint promotion and presentation. One thing I'll share with you is that the Aquaculture Association is actively involved in a number of specific research and development projects that we either manage ourselves at the association, or we assist our members in managing some of these programs, all for the joint cause of advancing the industry. We're working with the Atlantic Fisheries Fund to provide a fisheries assistance, an aquaculture assistance program, financial assistance program for our members, so that they can modernize infrastructure, technology, and increase efficiency in their operations. We're working with, just so that you know, all of the finfish farms in Nova Scotia are certified by Best Aquaculture Practices, BAP certification, and a number of our shellfish farmers are also looking at BAP certification as a way of improving the industry and achieving best practices in their operations. We'll talk a little bit about the seaweed cultivation project in Cape Breton that is now in its third and final year. And our goal is to prove that we could grow sugar kelp on shellfish lines. And we've got 3 industry partners, Louisbourg Seafoods, who's with us today, Premium Seafoods and Bounty Bay Shellfish are all industry partners, and they've all got sugar kelp growing on their shellfish lines to see, number one, how in a multi-trophic environment that sugar kelp can prosper, can grow successfully, and also how we can increase biomass and increase profitability for shellfish farms going into the future. We also do a lot of community or export work in terms of introducing farmers and developing new markets. The one thing that the pandemic has shown, particularly on the shellfish side, is that we need to adapt and improve and enhance our distribution, our diversity of customers, our distribution channels, and that Oyster Export Cafe, introducing folks to the Northeastern United States market, has been a big success. Another example of work being done in Cape Breton is with the Fisheries Center. I'll point to 2004, 2005. There was an incredibly vibrant oyster industry operating in the Bredor Lakes. The MSX virus came into Cape Breton, came into the Bredor Lakes. Lots of speculation about how and why and all that sort of stuff. But the end result was the industry in the oyster industry in the Bredor Lakes was destroyed. It absolutely went from, I think there were 36 leases at the time to none being operating. So what we did a number of years ago was working with Escazone, working with Cape Breton University we looked at developing a tolerant resistant strain of oysters that could grow in an MSX virus environment. And the other thing we looked at is whether or not developing suspended culture for the Bredor Lakes was an effective way of opening up the Bredors to a new oyster industry. And the folks at the Fisheries Center and Cape Breton University, I think I know now have 6 new leases operating with suspended culture and growing oysters, and the survivability rate is incredibly encouraging. The other thing that we know, and we'll talk a little bit about regulations and about the requirements, but community engagement in the new regulatory framework that was introduced in 2015/16, mandatory requirement for community engagement. Before, it was nice to talk to the community. We wanted to get out and talk to local Nova Scotians about what was going on. That's no longer nice. Now it's mandatory. And so we've developed programs to help our farmers get out into the communities and talk to Nova Scotians and talk to people around their farms about what's going on and what they're trying to do. The other new mandatory requirement is a security bond program that is every farm in the province of Nova Scotia must have in marine waters, must have a security bond. The ANS now holds more than 85 leaseholders, holds the security bond for them. And we're very encouraged about that program. The other thing that we celebrate, and I'll get you to put it on everyone's calendar, is October 12th and 13th of this year. Forget the date that's on the chart there, but October 12th and 13th, the Nova Scotia Ministers Conference, Fisheries Conference, and the Aquaculture Sea Farmers Conference join forces, and you're all invited to come to Halifax for a major 2-day conference on aquaculture, fisheries, and fisheries development in the province. So finally, we do a lot of other programs that are research programs, and we're moving on. So this is and when I say that aquaculture is around the province, you can see the different farms that are around the province. $90 million in export value, 800 direct year-round jobs, 1,500 indirect supporting jobs. There are 250 aquaculture leases around the province, and 20 of those are land-based finfish. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that, again, aquaculture is widely supported around the province. This is December 2022 survey that we did of Nova Scotians, and really looking at opportunities for for Nova Scotians to support the industry and also provide advice to us on opportunities to enhance the labor side of the aquaculture industry and get out and talk to Nova Scotians about opportunities. So getting on to the regulatory framework. This is a little bit of a background, and I'll run right through this, is that back in 2013-14, the provincial government really put a moratorium on aquaculture development while they conducted the Dole Leahy Commission, and a lot of you may have heard that. The Dole Leahy Commission brought in their report on the responsible development for the aquaculture sector, which prompted and pushed the government to develop a new regulatory framework in 2016. So part of the key outcomes from that new regulatory framework were the creation of a Nova Scotia Aquaculture Review Board that would hear all expansions, new leases, boundary amendments for marine applications. Land-based and species and gear amendments are administrative. There's a new 6-month option to lease initiative that we'll talk about as we go along. Again, we talk about mandatory farm management plans. Each farm in the province has a farm management plan that they develop and is approved by the province for the operation of their farm. Talked about the security bond program and community engagement, along with there are new environmental monitoring program standards that have been introduced. And one of the other outcomes from the new regulatory framework was that the enforcement agency now is the Department of Environment rather than Fisheries and Aquaculture. I wanted to share with you this because in developing lease applications and license applications in the province of Nova Scotia, the guiding principles that you must, as a farmer, satisfy are these eight guiding principles. They're in the development plans, they're in the farm management plans. So things like, is this the optimum use of this marine resource? Things like, does the public have the right to navigation? How are you mitigating that there is an opportunity for public to work around and navigate around ocean-based, marine-based farms? Things like, what is the contribution of the proposed operation to the community? So these eight factors are mandatory requirements in any development plan for a new lease, for a renewal of a lease, or for an expansion of a lease. Just to give you an idea so when we're talking about, I'm going to share a couple of slides with you that really talk about the amount of investment that I believe is exciting for the province of Nova Scotia. So this is a map. The black dots or the purple dots are where we've got some options going in. We talked about that new 6-month option process. If you look at the green dots around the province, these are new administrative leases that are being applied for in the province. And if you look at the orange dots, or the yellow, the orange dots, they're actually new adjudicative leases that are being applied for in the province. And we already went over that. And so what I want to give you is just a little example of from the leasing and licensing perspective. This is a provincial video. It's about 2 minutes long, so I'm going to see if this works. And hopefully it does.
We do see your video, but we don't hear it. We might not have the sound engaged quite yet. Would you like me to bring it up on my side so that we can play it?
I'll stop it here. Okay, so I'll stop that. Thank you, Jeremy. And if you want to bring the video up, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Give me 1 second to have that ready for you.
I'll leave it on this because this is the next slide anyway. We're getting down to the end. It's always the problem of trying to implant videos into presentations.
We're getting better.
In Nova Scotia, the provincial government is the lead regulator of the aquaculture industry. It is committed to an open and transparent aquaculture licensing and leasing process that provides the opportunity for public and stakeholder participation. A license is required for the operation of all aquaculture sites in the province. A lease is also required for marine sites for the use of Crown Waterway and sea bottom. An administrative process is used for decisions on new land-based sites, renewal or assignment of existing licenses and leases, experimental licenses and leases in aquaculture development areas, reallocation of existing sites, boundary amendments that do not result in expansion of a site, and culture method amendments for existing sites. Administrative decisions are made by the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture Administrator. Applicants meet with department staff to identify what information is required to be collected and submitted. Applicants gather biophysical, technical, and social data depending on the nature of the application, and prepare a development plan. Applicants submit the application form, development plan, and any additional information outlined by the department. The department reviews the application, requests additional information if needed, shares the completed application with other federal and provincial agencies for review and input, and consults with First Nations if the nature of the proposal requires it. The department publishes a notice welcoming the public to submit written comments on the application for 30 days. Comments that are relevant to the application will be posted on the department's website, including the name of the person commenting and the community in which they live. The administrator decides to approve with conditions, or reject the application, and issues a written decision, including relevant public comments and the rationale for the decision.
Perfect. And let me see if I can get back here. Hopefully everybody can now see that again. So I'm just about to finish up. So as you can tell by that, the process, the regulatory process, the licensing and licensing process is detailed. But in our opinion, it doesn't, and it isn't stopping the level of interest in investment in Nova Scotia. The leases at the top are administrative and talk to the process that was, these are new expansions and new amendment applications that are going through. The ones on the bottom half of this slide are all the current applications for marine adjudicative hearings. So the level of interest is high in Nova Scotia, and we're very excited about that. Now, if I can go forward, and I don't know why I'm not being able to advance my screen, Jeremy.
Oh, there we go. It's moving now.
Okay, so in the adjudicative process, just want to share this with you because while the administrative process is detailed, the adjudicative process is totally different. Proposals are submitted. We talked about the lease options that are awarded, and that gives the proponent the opportunity for 6 months to do all of the scoping requirements, of all of the community engagement, all of the work that needs to be done to develop the development plan. So the application goes in, development plan, scoping, and information is requested. Finally, the review is being set between the department review, Aboriginal consultation, feds and provincial government. And finally, it goes to the review board, the new Aquaculture Review Board. It was a 3-person. I believe that now it's currently 7 people on the review board that look at applications around the province, and will soon be 10. And then finally, the review board issues their decision on all of these adjudicative applications going forward. And just to give you an idea, this is the set timeline for the Nova Scotia Aquaculture Review Board, all the way from the top box that talks about when the application is referred, all the way down to the number of days that they've got to set a public hearing, who gets notified, when the public notice of hearing is published, so that the public knows about it. On the right-hand side, you'll see that they're accepting applications for interveners, and an intervener can either be a supporter of the application or an opponent of the application, but they're invited to apply. Then the Nova Scotia Review Board makes their decision on which interveners, if any, are are authorized to participate in the hearings. And then finally, the Aquaculture Review Board holds their hearings and then issues the department or issues the decision to all the parties involved. And that's kind of how it works, folks. I just wanted to give you a run through. That's what the industry has to comply with and in terms of acceptance and moving the industry ahead. We're very excited about, obviously, with the level of interest and investment that is coming from farmers all around the province. We're very excited about the level of interest for the future. And so, Nathaniel, I'll turn it back to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'll turn it back to you. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to hang around, and if there's any questions, more than happy to be part of it.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. No, great presentation, Tom. Appreciate it. A lot of information packed into that short time span. And as I think people can see, it is quite complicated and complex. And I think that's one of the big things is to a lot of planning definitely goes into getting involved in the industry. So just want to remind people, if you have a question, go down the Q&A box in the bottom. So if you have any for Tom, to put those in there, and then we'll go through those at the end of the session, and Tom can speak to those. So moving right along, here to introduce the next speaker will be Melissa Rommens. Melissa received her BSc and MSc in biology from the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, focusing on the culture of alternative marine aquaculture species. Soon after, she launched a career in marine finfish farming, spending almost 20 years in the industry operating or managing marine finfish hatcheries or grow-out facilities. Within these roles, she was also given opportunities to manage multi-year R&D programs and coordinate international and regional working groups. In 2013, Melissa co-founded the company Sustain Aqua, a consulting firm that specializes in working directly with small and medium-sized producers, including land-based aquaculture companies, marine shellfish farmers, and marine finfish farmers, to help develop and integrate technologies and processes and improve productivity and economic success. She's also worked with the province of Nova Scotia as they have implemented their regulatory framework. Currently, Melissa spends a lot of time training others in basic aquaculture practices and the biological basis of aquaculture production, and advertising producers on how to navigate aquaculture regulatory regimes and sustainability standards. In this regard, Melissa has been a course instructor and curriculum consultant for the NSCC and the Canadian Aquaculture Institute, as well as for several institutions and companies tailored company-tailored training programs. Melissa is integrally involved with the industry development in Atlantic Canada as an executive member of the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia and a member of the PEI Aquaculture Alliance. And obviously through this introduction, you can tell Melissa does work closely with the department and the industry in Nova Scotia. So I'll hand it over to Melissa, and always appreciate her words of wisdom and what she's has to say regarding the industry and her constructive criticisms that I regularly get and appreciate. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this series. I always do appreciate getting the opportunity to talk to people about aquaculture, particularly when we're talking about or instructing people about how to begin and how to really enhance the potential for growth of the industry. I'm going to try sharing my screen here. Just bear with me. Somebody could please acknowledge that you can see my first slide.
We certainly can. We see the fantastic title slide, Melissa.
Thank you. So first of all, Nathaniel's given me a great introduction. I do appreciate that. It is a fairly small industry, so most of us who have been in industry and government know each other quite well and have worked together. But just to give you, I guess, a little pictorial of some of the things that I've had the great opportunity to do in the industry, either in the past or currently. As Nathaniel mentioned, I was a producer in Nova Scotia for a number of years, but When that stint ended, I guess I really saw a need for biological and technical services, particularly for some smaller companies, and focused initially on helping to develop R&D initiatives for smaller companies, but really a lot of my focus now is in helping people navigate either through training or through providing advice with regards to technical issues, regulatory frameworks, sustainability standards, whatever really has that science or biological background. And aquaculture really is founded in science. Both the regulatory framework as well as the practices in aquaculture are really founded in biology and engineering, and that's really my perspective. And Nathaniel mentioned I also worked with the province when they began to implement their regulations, and we continue to have a great working relationship. But my perspective today is really that of what I see from producers or farmers or somebody who wants to enter into the industry, some of the common things that I see, some of the suggestions that I have, or some perspectives that I wanted to share about this aspect of the industry. First of all, it's very obvious that Nova Scotia aquaculture is doing great things. Tom did already show you the slide, which shows the map of Nova Scotia and all of the sites in Nova Scotia, which you can see if you log on to Nova Scotia Aquaculture map. You can get to see all of the sites in Nova Scotia, as well as their ownership and what species are being produced. And as Tom mentioned, you know, it really strikes me to see how widespread aquaculture is in the province. From coast to coast, we have some very vibrant and very productive aquaculture operations. We hone in a little more closely to Cape Breton. You can see that Cape Breton is no exception. We have aquaculture operations across the island, with some concentration, of course, in the Bredor Lakes, with the greatest production of product in Cape Breton being mussels and trout. And we hope to see a resurgence in the oyster industry, as Tom mentioned, with some of the research that's going on there. One of the great things about aquaculture is the fact that there is a tremendous potential to do even more than what we're doing today. We are poised very well to succeed in this industry. We are close to one of the largest fresh seafood markets in the world. We obviously have a great and long coastline that's available for development. We have transferable skills from the fishing industry, although I don't want people to think that sea farming is fishing. It is not, but there are skills that are transferable from one to the other. Nova Scotia has a recognized, respected, and appreciated history of providing quality, tasty seafood, great reputation for its seafood. Canada has a great food safety program. We have the logistics worked out for the storage and the shipping of seafood products. And we also have tremendous brain power in this province and in the Maritimes to work on aspects of the industry, to provide support for regulatory development and such things. So really a tremendous amount of potential to do even more than what we're doing in Nova Scotia. But if I can quote one of the previous presenters in the series, Dana Morris, I believe, did the first presentation in the series a couple of months ago. And he summed things up for people who are interested in starting in aquaculture very succinctly. And that is that there are many things to keep in mind. This is something that has to be acknowledged, and that is that not every aquaculture idea is a good one. There are many good ideas, but there are a lot of things that need to be considered before somebody invests too heavily financially into the industry. And those things are what species are to be cultivated, many considerations with regards to the species. What is that life cycle of that species? What is its suitability, its rate of growth? Are there any special husbandry needs? And what is the technical feasibility of growing that species? And what about the location that you've chosen to use for your operation? What are the biophysical characteristics of the environment? What's the water quality? What is the potential for staffing? And what are the logistics going to be with regards to that location? Finally, for the specific species and the product that you're producing, what is the market like? Is the market established? Will it pay enough? Is that market saturated? One thing that's particularly important in developing aquaculture plans is what is the minimum scale for you to be profitable? And that kind of takes into account all of the other features, because at the end of the day, you want to develop a business that is going to be sustainable from all sides, all fronts. And the financial front is certainly one of the important ones. So you want to make sure that you are going to develop a business or an activity that is going to be able to provide returns. So ultimately, to be successful, you need to have a plan, and that means a business plan. You really need to know where you're going, and you need to understand your risks. You need to understand these risks all along your supply chain from start to finish. And I'm bringing this up because I often get calls from people who are very keen and interested to start in the aquaculture industry, but typically people have more homework to do. And it's not because their idea is not a good one, but it's because they need a little more thought and a little more research with regards to where they want to go with the plan. So if you're thinking of entering the aquaculture industry, the first thing that you have to do is you really have to do your homework on what it is that you're trying to achieve and what it is that you want to do. So, sounds difficult, but where do you begin? Well, thankfully, in Nova Scotia, there are lots of places to start, lots of places and people to talk to. First word of advice for someone who's interested in the industry is go talk to the people who are already in the industry. Sea farmers are some of the best people that you're ever going to meet. It's something that's kept me engaged in the industry for my entire career. So go talk to people. Most people who are in the aquaculture industry are more than happy to show you what they do, what they should have done, what they shouldn't have done. They're typically more than happy to speak to people, particularly people who are excited about the industry and want to see it grow. Tap into the academic resources. We have some tremendous academic institutions as well as other science institutions in the province. I see some of you here attending this session today. CBU, Dalhousie, and SCC, I believe the class is online today, so welcome. CMAR, we have Leah here today from CMAR, St. Mary's, St. FX, Mount St. Vincent, and the University of St. Anne. All tremendous academic resources, and if I've missed any, my apologies. All tremendous academic resources that are very, very close to home and very knowledgeable and will be very helpful for you if you want to begin in the industry. And if you contact somebody from one of these institutions, they may not have the answers to your questions, but there's little doubt that they will know somebody who does have the answers to the questions. Also, don't be afraid to contact the AANS. You've just met Tom. He gave a great presentation, great introduction to our session today. Understand he's got a great team behind him as well that help to support the initiatives of the Aquaculture Association. As he mentioned, they represent more than 95% of the farmers in the province, so they really know what's going on. And we also have, of course, the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Our moderator today, Nathaniel Feindel, of course, is a very important figure in the department, and he also works along with a number of colleagues who can help guide you on the regulatory process. So reach out and talk to people. Ultimately, if you're thinking of entering the industry, that is where you begin. But we're not only here today to talk about the entering the industry, we're also here today to talk about the regulations. And I think that from seeing Tom's presentation, you probably could get a gist of the fact that the regulations for aquaculture are quite complicated, they're quite complex. In fact, there are federal, provincial, as well as sometimes municipal requirements for aquaculture operations. As mentioned in the video, in Nova Scotia, and I'm particularly saying Nova Scotia because aquaculture is not regulated the same way across Canada. It's actually regulated somewhat differently depending on what province you're in. So specifically in Nova Scotia, a marine site requires both a lease and a license, where a lease entitles you to use the seabed or the lake bed for cultivation practices or for anchoring. So a marine site requires a lease and a license, and the license will give you permission to actually put stock on the site. A land-based site, however, requires you to only have a license. You obviously don't need a lease because you're not using the seabed. So in Nova Scotia, when you apply for a new site, if you're applying for a marine site, you're actually applying for both a lease and a license. If you're applying for a land-based site, you're applying for a license. However, there are also regulations beyond simply these lease and license requirements. There are also regulations that cover operational aspects. But first, if you are thinking of entering the industry and thinking of getting a new site, the process that's going to happen is going to depend on what you're asking for. Getting a marine site is generally much more involved than getting a land-based site, but there are defined processes and defined factors that are considered in the decision-making process. And these are actually defined in regulation. If you're looking at getting a new marine site, Tom had some slides on this as well already previously. You would have seen them. However, I thought it would show them in a very, very simplified format. Even though it's in a simplified format, it does give you an idea as to the complexity of the process for getting a new marine site. We call that process an adjudicative process because there is a piece of this which is adjudicated. But ultimately, in order to get a new marine site, the first thing you do is you apply to the minister for an option to lease. And that really gives you an area that you've said, I'm interested in looking in this area to see if I want to develop a marine site. You spend some time going through scoping, which means that you're going to explore the possibilities in that option to lease area. And that exploration is done by looking at the biophysical characteristics of the water, by talking to the community members, by finding out who else uses that area, whatever it is that you have to do to determine whether or not aquaculture is going to be a good fit for the area. If you find areas within that option to lease that will be suitable for aquaculture, you may submit an application to the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture for one or more sites. And it's within this application where you propose your plan. And this is your development plan. What are you going to do for your aquaculture development? How are you going to develop that area? Once you've submitted that plan, that then goes to the province who reviews it. And there's a tremendous amount or a significant amount of back and forth with provincial and federal bodies who also have to weigh into this process, because when you're using the marine waters, there's a lot of overlap with many other federal and provincial departments, and so they weigh in on the application. There's also a public comment period. Once through that back and forth with the provincial and federal bodies, as well as the public comment period, there's also consultation with First Nations if that's deemed to be necessary or deemed to be appropriate for the proposal. Once through that review process and the answers have been given, the information goes to the Aquaculture Review Board, which is that independent tribunal which has a public hearing to decide whether or not or what type of aquaculture operation would be permitted. And the Aquaculture Review Board makes a decision with regards to the outcome of your application. So that's the adjudicative process, which is the process that has to happen for new marine sites as described in the regulation. If you're applying for a new land-based site, it's a different process, a bit of, I guess you could say, abbreviated process or a bit of a less involved process. And this is the process that was described in the video that Tom showed. Within the administrative process, you have again that scoping period where you talk to the department, you explore the possibilities of what you think could be possible for an aquaculture development in the area you're interested in. If you find a possibility, you submit an application to the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, where again you propose the plan for your aquaculture development in a development plan. That plan is under review by the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, as well as their network partners. And again, there's back and forth with federal and provincial bodies and First Nations, as well as a public comment period until people's questions are answered or potential issues can be mitigated, until finally, when that back and forth is finished, there will be a decision rendered. So again, still a very clearly defined process, but a different process for a land-based site, what we call an administrative process, because it happens without the adjudicated aquaculture review board. It happens administratively within the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture and with its network bodies or network partners. Regardless of the process, there are factors that are written in regulation that must be considered, and they're different for marine sites than they are for land-based sites. Now, we often see these factors listed. I wanted to highlight just in bold what the significant aspects of these factors are. For marine sites, there are 8 factors, and really the first factor is kind of like a summary of all of the other factors. The first factor is the optimum use of marine resources. So the first question that would be asked about marine sites is this an optimum use of marine resources? And how is that determined? Well, it's determined by looking at the other factors that in regulation are required to be considered for marine sites. And they include economic development, they include fisheries activities, oceanographic and biophysical characteristics of the water, other users, navigation aspects, wild salmon, and other aquaculture sites. Just as Tom mentioned, these 8 factors are the fundamental factors that have to be considered for all decisions made on marine sites. For land-based sites, these factors are different, actually. The factors that are to be considered for land-based sites and land-based decision-making are the financial viability of the operation and the technical viability of the operation, as well as the extent to which what you've proposed follows regulations, as well as other factors that the administrator considers relevant. So again, less involved, but still covers everything that you would want to cover with regards to licensing for an aquaculture operation. Now, what is also important to understand is that the onus is really on the applicant to demonstrate if and how their plan aligns with the factors. If it's a marine site, it's according to those 8 factors that must be considered for marine applications. And if it's a land-based site, it's according to the 4 factors that are determined or that are used for decision making. So the applicant really, again, has to do their homework to make sure that they're aware of what the factors are and to demonstrate how they align with the factors, or if perhaps there are some negative impacts, how they can mitigate risks to those factors, or how they can, for example, for economic impact, maximize benefits of those factors that have been deemed important. When all that work is finished, and if an applicant is successful, the business is offered a lease if it's a marine site with a 20-year term and or a license with a 10-year term. So it is a significant amount of time that you're offered these agreements, and renewals of these terms are much simpler than your new application. So renewals happen according to an administrative process, not an adjudicative process, which I hope I've shown you is a much simpler process. If there are some changes that you'd like made within your lease or your license, you can apply for amendments. They are possible. Some are more complicated than others because some amendments may require the adjudicative process, particularly those that apply to marine sites, particularly if you're increasing your area that you want to work in, or you're putting finfish in an area where finfish wasn't before, then you need to go through that adjudicative process. But many amendments simply go through that administrative process. So you have your lease or your license, as I mentioned previously. You don't stop there because there are also ongoing operational regulatory requirements that will apply. In Nova Scotia, there are the aquaculture management regulations, which encompass the farm management plan, which is what Tom mentioned previously. You also have to follow federal operational regulatory requirements, which are the aquaculture activities regulations, and there could be other operational requirements that you have to follow depending on where you are and the nature of the operations. So the regulatory process or the regulations that apply to aquaculture in Nova Scotia. They are fairly complex. So that is, again, something else that somebody who's interested in entering the industry really has to do their homework on, so that you understand things. But I did want to mention before I end, and Tom mentioned this already, the Nova Scotia aquaculture regulations are undergoing a review. They have been in effect for a number of years, and it's been determined that it's time to step back and take a look at how they're working. And there also may be a new federal aquaculture act in the works. So you have to stay tuned and stay aware and see if there are any updates to the regulations in Nova Scotia. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I hope I've provided a little bit of clarity on pathways to entry and regulation to the aquaculture industry. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I've left you with my email address in case you're interested. And I just wanted to leave you with a beautiful photo of the Bredor Lakes, because it's one of my favorite places to be, and it seemed very appropriate. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Melissa. There's a great presentation, great overview of the industry, and I think some really good information on where to start. Can't echo enough one of your main points on doing your homework, because there's a lot. It may seem onerous, but I think that process does speak to the pieces that you did outline there, from that people have to really consider as a species, location, and market. And every area is different, and that has implications for a farming operation. I get people coming to the department all the time wanting to start farming, and in some cases they'll say, where can I go? And it's like, well, where do you want to go? What works for you, right? And you really get a range of people interested, and we sort of vet people on where they are in the process, and it's really how much homework have they done, and are they ready to really start the process, because there are timelines associated with it that can expire, and then you do have to restart the process all over again. You gave some great high level assessment and overview of the process, and it is like, I can't echo enough what you said about approach industry, approach the association, universities, everyone that's been involved, and to get their insights, because there are aspects of it. There's layers upon layers within each parts of those, and the department is the main regulator, but there's 11 to 14 depending on the type of application, other government agencies that provide comment, and which can lead to conflict, we'll say, or overlap for sites, and that creates a nuance and speaks to the uniqueness of the industry and where you want to go. So
thanks, Nathaniel.
Appreciate the presentation, and I think it's generated some questions that we'll get to here in a bit. So we've heard from Tom, who represents a lot of the industry within the province, and we've heard from Melissa, who was directly involved in the industry and still is working with industry and the department and many stakeholders and providing advice. And now we'll hear from Michael Moore, who is working with is an aquaculturist within the province with Louisbourg Seafoods. So Michael was born and raised in Sydney, Nova Scotia. He graduated from the university, Dalhousie University. Michael has worked with as a business development manager and in project delivery for the past 10 years, with a focus on marine related developments. He joined Louisbourg Seafoods in the spring of 2019, and he is the manager of Cape Breton Bivalve. Louisbourg Seafoods aquaculture farm is located in St. Anne's, Cape Breton, and Michael is also working as part of Louisbourg Seafoods project delivery team. So, it's a bit of a modest intro, but I think Michael will expand on that, and very interested and excited to hear what he has to say, since he's sort of jumped in as our regulations have been updated and are currently under review, like Tom and Melissa said, and I'm looking to hear what Michael has to say.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to thank the Cape Breton Partnership and Nova Scotia Community College for inviting me to participate in the Ocean Farming Series. Just to give you a little bit more background, currently I work for Louisbourg Seafoods, a world-class company that has allowed me to manage Cape Breton Bivalve. I also sit on the Arc of the Coast, the Eastern Cape Breton Cooperative Alliance, and am Vice President of the Eastern Nova Scotia Marine Stewardship Society. Prior to my experience in working for Louisbourg Seafoods, I spent time in project management and business development management, working in the areas of port development, ship repair, marine-related construction projects, such as the construction of finfish feed barges, wharf developments. And I do want to just say, pardon me, if my voice goes in and out, I'm actually in isolation with COVID at the moment. But to get going, I'm going to speak from the perspective of a farm manager and as a business development manager within the industry. So I'm just going to share my screen, and my presentation has a lot of points that have already been brought up by Tom and Melissa, all great points, and I do want to thank the previous two presenters as well. But I'm just going to share my screen and see if everybody can see that.
We do, in fact, see your presentation, Mike.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you, thank you. So as you can see, I'm gonna speak from the perspective of being a farm manager. I'm going to speak to this very first photo. This is one of our vessels, Little Caitlin, at our new wharf constructed in Englishtown, St. Anne's Bay, where our farm operation consists of 4 main leases. We are licensed to farm mussels, oysters, scallops, and do have seaweed on one of our leases in sugar kelp. As I look at the agenda of the topics I wish to go through, certainly I'm going to touch a little bit on the regulations through the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. I'm then going to move on to financial assistance programs, which is a key part of when you're looking at managing and growing a farm, understanding what financial tools are available to you. And then I'm going to speak a bit about the people in the industry, a supportive network, the community that you farm within, different associations, and the help that you could receive from other farmers and harvesters. And then I'm going to end with the business model and operations. So I'm going to use this presentation really as a speaking point, and I have a tendency to go off on some tangents, but the moderator can feel, if he feels the need to reel me in, by all means. So really, as previously visited by Tom and Melissa, if you're looking at acquiring a license or lease, you make your application through the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, and it's initially through a 3-phase adjudicative process. But really what I want to speak to in this process, because I think we've certainly had it outlined and highlighted in the previous two presenters, is understanding the importance of planning. I mean, I put a quote up by Winston Churchill: plans are of little importance, but planning is essential. When you're going in to either apply for a new lease or expand, you need to clearly understand that, I will say this carefully, you need to walk before you run. You need to understand, primarily what location are you looking at, and then beyond that location, you're going to have to understand, what is the carrying capacity? What is the actual environment? Is it serviceable? Can you access that location easily? These are all things that you have to consider, because one stage is certainly entering the industry from a regulatory perspective, but you also have to always have in the back of your mind an operational perspective. So it would be great to achieve a lease on a site that, yes, it's a prime growing area for bivalves or for seaweeds and kelps, but you really have to consider the planning of an operational perspective. What kind of vessels are you going to need? What infrastructure do you have to set up? I've also included the available resources for this section. We've already watched the video through Tom's presentation, so I'm not going to replay that. It's the exact video from the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. But certainly I had a chance before making this presentation. I was in a conversation with the department and I asked them, is there anything that you would like to highlight? And it was certainly that they are highly accessible. Please email, reach out to them throughout the process when you're trying to make an application for lease and license. So with that being said, I do want to move on to the financial assistance programs, because when you're getting into farm operations, I think it's maybe an underrated point where people don't realize how much things are going to cost. And I'll tell you a personal story as a farm manager. So vessels are expensive. Vessels are just basically floating holes you throw money into. So when you're operating, you have to understand that at any given time something could go wrong. So having other financial instruments available to you to help with your operation could maybe offset some of the challenges you may occur in other areas. Certainly, I would encourage everybody to access the Atlantic Fisheries Fund, the AFF. It's based on the principles of if you have an area which you want to expand in your harvesting and processing that is innovative, it can certainly help offset those costs of new equipment and new processes, which is critical to the farming and production of your processing of your product. So most definitely, if anyone requires additional information or experience through the AFF, sorry, Tom, I'm going to send a plug out to you. Certainly apply through the ANS. My information will be available at the end of this presentation. Please feel free to reach out to me. Other areas you can look at is the Fisheries and Aquaculture Student Bursary Program. Certainly that could help assist with some of the labor difficulties that you may encounter. You may be able to attract some students that are currently exploring careers in aquaculture. And another, I'm just going to take a quick tangent to say that there's a great program in a certificate for sea farm operations at the Nova Scotia Community College, pardon me. I encourage anybody that's looking at getting into the industry to certainly seek that course out. But if I could take a step back to the financial assistance programs, look and research the Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board. Look at other organizations like Farm Credit Canada. Certainly, they would be looking at some successful applications, and not just to agrarian farming, but to aquaculture as well. And then, of course, there's the ACOA, Atlantic Canadian Opportunities Agency, and Nova Scotia Business Inc. So I don't think I can impress on people how important it is to understand that, entering the industry, making applications for license and leases, I mean, that is a process that you absolutely have to go through. The regulations are there for a reason, but you do have to follow the process. But beyond that, really think of the financial implications that you're going to have. Farming is not a cheap venture. The amount of infrastructure that you're going to require so that you can get your product up, your inventory up to a level that you have a sustainable product within your growth cycle year to year, so you have product to sell. One of the most, not mentioned, I guess, but important aspects of farming is, at the end of the day, you have to sell your product to make money to maintain your position in the industry. If you're going to survive as a farmer, you have to focus on that end product. But as we continue into that, I'm going to speak a little bit about the people in the industry and the supportive network that is there. First of all, you're going to be farming most likely in a rural setting in Nova Scotia. So community is important. You're going to have to consult with throughout your entry into the industry. And once you enter the industry, you're going to want to have an excellent relationship with those community members, those upland property owners, the local stakeholders, the residents within the community, and the local fishermen, and certainly any organization that may be concerned about environmental responsibilities and stewardship. When you are farming and operating within a rural setting, you are very much a part of the community and must respect and have a great relationship with those community members. And that can, and to speak bluntly, in terms of entering the industry of aquaculture, that can make you or break you. having that relationship with those local stakeholders. You know, in particular in St. Anne's, we've had the benefit of having a great relationship with our local fishermen and residents. If you look at our leases within St. Anne's Bay, the local fishermen, probably years before I was manager, you know, and long before when leases first entered into St. Anne's Bay, there might have been some you know, pushback in terms of that. But now the fishermen realize through a lot of interaction and communication with them that the actual mussel leases that we have there create an environment for the growth of lobster. And you'll notice in St. Anne's Bay that most of the fishermen harvest within the bay now and very rarely go outside of the bay. So with that, I'll say, if you're forming an aquaculture, applying for an aquaculture lease and license within a community, make sure that you certainly engage those community members. But then to go on further to the supportive network that's available to you as a farmer, the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia, as previously mentioned, and with Tom Smith, the Atlantic Canada Fish Farmers Association, and also don't ignore harbor authorities and associations. So if you're setting up a lease somewhere, be cognizant of where you're going to be launching your vessels, the operational capacity nearby, and you have to maintain a great relationship with those harbor authorities and associations. So even further to this, you know, one of the best things about this industry is the people. I've had as a farm manager the ability to interact with a lot of other farmers and harvesters, and they are you know, the best people you will encounter. They will forget more about the industry than potentially you'll ever learn. Some of the older harvesters that are in the business, and they've always been able to provide pieces of information that have helped, and that comes right from entering and expanding leases right to current farm operations, from harvesting and farming and processing techniques. You know, it's just an opportunity for you to engage. I'm kind of moving towards my final slide. I'm keeping this a very quick and tight presentation. But excuse me there. But looking at one area I really want to speak to, beyond entering the industry and regulations, that is kind of meshed in with this slide here, is your business model and your operations. So from farming, as it has previously been mentioned from our previous two presenters, understanding your farm management plan and what that really means in terms of your farm operations, making sure that you have your marker buoys out because of navigational issues, understanding the depths at which you have your infrastructure at, because that's going to be important for the growth and maintenance of your inventory, understanding that maybe if you raise your lines up, if you had approval to do that, which you do have to apply for, and you do have to illustrate your farm management plan, your mussels, your scallops, your oysters can get additional light, additional nutrients. Understanding your responsibility for an environmental management plan. I think too, you know, as you enter the industry, obviously one of the first things you have to think of is the species. What are you going to grow? Are you going to get into seaweeds and kelps? Are you going to get into bivalves? Understanding, you know, when you initially make that entry into the marketplace with a specific species, are you going to look at diversification? And diversification is very important because all of the other things you may or may not have thought of as you apply for your license and lease are factors like predation, different weather events, different conditions that you could encounter a loss one year in a certain type of species. So understanding as you enter the industry, are you just going to stick to one species, or are you going to diversify? It gives you multiple areas, multiple divisions of revenue, but it also gives a little bit of protection in terms of if you did have a loss in one species or the other. Understanding your growth cycles and the care of your product and the maintenance of your product. If you do not, you know, you can aggressively seed a farm, but if you don't properly maintain it, then you could easily lose that product. And if you've lost that product, you've lost money, you've lost future revenue, and you won't be able to provide a final product in year 2 and year 3 because of the growth cycle. So understand the growth cycles of your products you're supplying or intend to process, and maintaining that. Understand your infrastructure. How much carrying capacity does each of your leases hold? Understanding what you can actually physically farm, and a lot of that is dictated by labor availability. And then additionally to that is your vessels and equipment, understanding the maintenance that is required with all of those items. Personal story, I had one hydraulic component to replace on one of our vessels, and I went to a local supplier, and they handed me the component, and the component was, you know, only a couple inches big, and it was well over $600. So I was left at the counter waiting because I thought more components would come with it. But that being said, once you decide on entering as a farmer, then you have to start thinking about how are you going to process your product. So it's great to say I'm going to farm, I'm going to put a plan together, I'm going to gain a lease and a license. But when you move through, I think you have to really be thinking of the long game, understanding and processing the requirements that that come along with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Understanding that a facility, whether you're processing or you're co-packing and co-processing, all of the regulations that are associated with processing. Are you going to process fresh, frozen, cooked? How are you going to process, and what are all the implications with that processing? You're going to have a QMP, a quality management plan. You're going to have to look at water treatment. Then you're going to have to look at packaging and logistics. One of the things as well, if I went back to a farm management plan, is wet storage. So you may not be able to harvest every day. You may have a loss in product. So having wet storage available for your product is another area that you're going to want to consider. And yet again, it wasn't a typo in my presentation, labor availability. Labor is one of the largest challenges. So you can have the best plan to enter the industry, but you also have to think of all these other measures to make sure that you're going to be successful, because ultimately you are doing this at the end of the day to be profitable so that you can continue in the industry and be successful. And the final aspect of business model and operations I'm going to mention is your final product. Who are your customers? Where are your markets located? Are there other processors that you can partner with? Yet again, your product diversification. How are you processing? And I'll speak to seaweed at this point. Seaweeds and kelps. Are you going to process them for soil conditioners, animal feeds? Once there's human consumption, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency comes in very heavily again. Are you looking at nutraceuticals? So I think you really have to take it beyond not only entering the industry from a perspective of regulations, but entering the industry as how am I going to manage and operate this farm? And I think speaking from a farming perspective and a business development perspective, certainly you have to be in lockstep with all of the regulations and go through all of those processes. And as Tom and Melissa have highlighted how important and how in-depth those processes are, I really encourage people to think about how am I going to build my business model? How am I going to operate? And one thing I am going to take a tangent on, if anybody can see this short video, this is we're seeding in St. Anne's Bay. So one aspect of your farm is going to be seed security. Where's your seed coming from? What transfer permits are required to transfer that seed if you don't have a wild set within your lease area? So understanding without seed security, how are you going to maintain your product from year 2, year 3, year 4 as you go move through the growth cycles? And certainly I'm available for questions. This is one of our other vessels, the First M, and this is a great photo of St. Anne's Bay. But yet again, thank you for your time. I've kept the presentation quick, and thank you once again for having me.
All right. Well, thanks, Michael. It was a great presentation, great perspective, and see a lot of overlap between all the presentations, and really, I think between you and Melissa hit on some of the major points that people need to consider when getting into the industry. There's a lot of planning. It is a major planning exercise, really, when you want to embark on this type of endeavor. So, appreciate the comments and the presentation.
Thank you.
So I guess we do have some questions. I'll I'll start from the top. I think we've got, it says about 6 here. So I guess one is from Kate. And what do you think the biggest challenge is in terms of the current regulations? So maybe we'll start with Tom, and we'll go through the panel on and for some comments.
Okay, there. Well, great question, and you know, incredibly timely. I think it was Melissa that mentioned that the industry and the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aqua. So first of all, it's the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, that when the regulations were introduced in 15-16, it called for a review in a timely manner, and the new Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture, Minister Craig, has called for that review, and that is actually, so the question is right now, and because we are engaging with our members, we've held meetings over the last couple of weeks, getting ready for the review to ask exactly that question. What are the main concerns? And rather than get too far into the weeds, I can tell you that the you know, the big issue right now is, first of all, as we all pointed out, as Melissa pointed out, multiple jurisdictional bodies involved, or agencies involved in the issuing of leasing and licensing, whether or not it certainly is the jurisdiction of the province, but that doesn't cut DFO, CFIA, Transport Canada, Department of Natural Resources, and the Department of Aboriginal Affairs out of the question. So they all have to be consulted. That process is timely. That process is very, very complicated. So one of the things that is coming out of our review of the regulatory framework is, how can we make that process more efficient? How can we make that process more inclusive of the network partners that must be? And again, I mean, you can't do this in a vacuum. So I say, you know, I'm saying that they must be engaged, and so we're looking for ways to improve that. One of the initiatives that I think the department took just in the recent couple of months is that we have a new oyster farm being developed in the Ayrshire area in Lennox Passage and West Ayrshire, Nova Scotia, and prior to his application, the province got together all of the network partners. I forget how many were on the call, but it was 15 or 16, along with the applicant, to talk about what was he trying to do, and get some of these questions out front. So that was a major step forward. I think that was, and something we certainly support. So you know, getting some of those answers up front. The other challenge is, and I think we've all talked about it, is making sure that the application, when it finally gets into, after you've done your scoping work, after you've done your due diligence on oceanographic characteristics, all of that sort of stuff, making sure that your application, and we can help with that, and people like Melissa can help with that, making sure that your application is as complete as it can be, making sure that you've number one, answered the factors, that you've number two, got a development plan and a business plan that are going to take the business forward. So that's a challenge. And the other challenge is with any new regulations, and you know, they're 5, 6, 7 years in the making. They're relatively new. So the other challenge is working with the government, and that's why we say that our third pillar of our strategic plan is collaboration, working with the government to find ways of breaking down bureaucracy, improving efficiencies, and working with all of the stakeholder partners to make the application process as inclusive and as forward thinking as we can. So those are just a couple of the ones. Again, there are different regulations in the provincial regulations that don't perfectly match up with the aquaculture activity regulations, which are federal. So you know, some of our submissions that we're going to put in terms of the regulatory review and areas for improvement are trying to get the different bodies to understand the inconsistencies in some of the regulations and where they can more properly align. So that's another area. So those are kind of some of the big, but it's a great question because we're in that review process right now, and we're reaching out to our members and reaching out to industry, and they're actually, the farmers are telling us some of their issues with regards to areas for improvement in the regulations and in the operational practices. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Sure. No, great comments, Tom. Melissa, do you have any comment?
I just have one word, and that's timelines, and that won't surprise anybody. You know, that review process and the feedback with the network partners is, as Tom said, that's very important to have that engagement. But the amount of time that back and forth takes is a long time, and it's both for land-based and for marine applications in my experience, and I can only really speak from my experience, it can be extensive. And, you know, it could hinder industry from developing. Mike spoke of some of the funding opportunities that are out there. You know, if the timelines of the application exceed the funding opportunities, then you have problems, right? And so that would be the one thing. But, you know, the department is undergoing a regulatory review right now, and I'm hoping that, you know, they'll hear these concerns, but I suspect that's going to be the primary one on the licensing and listing process.
Yep. Oh, thanks for the comment. And Michael?
I'd have to echo Melissa's comment and Tom's as well on timelines. From a personal experience of managing your farm, you know, you start from looking at, okay, let's say I want to expand into, I'm just going to say oysters, just for the sake of argument, and we have to apply to get approval to grow this species and product. We've already done research. We've already reached out to potential customers. So the time that it takes, that timeline can frustrate a little bit of what you're trying to achieve. But at the same time, and to Melissa's comment around financial assistance programs, there can be some programs when you're looking at it and the timeline just goes beyond, your approval goes beyond the end date of that financing option. We've had that happen, but you know, I'm sure that from a regulatory perspective, they're looking at trying to adjust those timelines and shorten them, and that would certainly be a benefit to the industry if that could be obtained.
Yeah, all great comments, and I guess I can make one from the department's perspective on timelines. It's something I get questioned on regularly, routinely, and it's definitely a criticism we get on a routine basis. You know, and we are going through this regulatory review, as Tom said. Our current minister has adopted what the previous government committed to, and that's looking at what our new regulations and refining them, right? They were put in place, and, you know, we've heard from industry and all stakeholders. It doesn't just include, you know, those directly involved in the industry. It involves others that are, you know, supportive of the industry, but also against it, right? So it's an interesting way to approach it. And also the other government agencies, and you know, it's a big educational experience for them at times, because again, they had to become aware of the process, and in some cases they have to be educated on aquaculture, and it hasn't been in their area, and they then have an application there that they look at it from varying perspectives, and it might not always be from what their department's mandate is responsible for, and that can lead to challenges for you know, an operator in their application, and really you know, can slow that process down. But I guess just for people's knowledge, you know, the department doesn't have the ability to legislate timelines specific to other government agencies. You know, other government agencies provide advice to the department on their application, and really, you know, they have other responsibilities as well. So that feeds into the timelines and timely responses and whatnot. But we are looking at ways to improve those efficiencies. So hopefully we can expedite processes in the future. So
Nathaniel,
think
I
there's
just wanted to pop in quickly. We are a little bit over time, so we're just going to keep it to 2 more questions that we have here in the Q&A. And for anyone that didn't get their question answered, or if you have more questions, we will be sharing our speakers' contact info. Please feel free to reach out to them when we share that. I know lots of great conversations are going to come from today, so that's great. But Nathaniel, I'll leave you to the next 2 questions, and then we'll hear from Tyler Mathis with our office as well.
Sure. So the next one's from Jean, and the question is, which agencies department have the relevant local, provincial, and federal regulatory authorities, regulatory compliance, and/or regulatory oversight responsibility for aquaculture-based seaweed/shellfish industry activities? So I'll hand it over to Tom if you want to talk about that first, or I could probably.
You broke up there for a second, Nathaniel. Can you give me that question again, or maybe I can just look at it in the Q&A?
Sure. It's basically which local, provincial, and federal regulatory authorities have the oversight for seaweed and shellfish industry activities.
Well, so ultimately in the province of Nova Scotia, the regulatory authority for leasing and licensing is the province of Nova Scotia, and that includes shellfish and seaweed as well as finfish species. So that's the ultimate regulatory authority, and that's the process that both I outlined as well as in Melissa's presentation. So you can take that through. The other authorities that are really important, for example, in shellfish, if you're looking to export shellfish out of Nova Scotia, then you're going to need permits from CFIA. You're going to have to go through a certified CFIA plant in order to sell that product out of the province of Nova Scotia. So regardless of the province's leasing and licensing, in terms of marketing that product, you're going to have to do that. In terms of other really important, and not that so for example, DFO, absolutely responsible for their mandate is fish and fish habitat. So they're responsible for the bottom of the ocean. They also, you're not going to move fish in the province of Nova Scotia without an introductions and transfer permit that DFO is responsible for. Other really important agencies around this industry is Transport Canada. And just so you know, I don't know how clear it is, but through an MOU, and Nathaniel can probably speak about this, but through an MOU with the province of Nova Scotia and Transport Canada, the province of Nova Scotia has decided that Transport Canada's buoy marking and mooring marking requirements will be the requirement of the province of Nova Scotia. So you're going to need a Transport Canada permit in order to get a lease and license in Nova Scotia. So they're a very important agency. So I hope that answers. In terms of seaweed, the leasing is through the Department of Nova Scotia, and if you have a shellfish lease, or actually if you have any marine lease in the province of Nova Scotia and you wish to add seaweed as a species, then you go through the province to do that. And we're actively working with the province on trying to improve and make that species addition of seaweed to shellfish leases in the province of Nova Scotia more efficient and more wide reaching, if you will. So I hope that answers that question.
Sure. Michael or Melissa, do you have any comment?
I think Tom answered it perfectly.
I'd just like to add to it, but I will be brief. For compliance for the aquaculture regulations, and Nathaniel, you may be best to answer this. It is Nova Scotia Department of Environment. For DFO for compliance, it would depend on what the compliance aspect would be. For AARs, for transfer permit, they do have DFO compliance, and of course Tom mentioned Transport Canada. So yeah, that would just be, I guess, a summary of my understanding of the compliance, regulatory compliance agencies that would become involved were there an activity that was questioned, I guess.
And the only thing I'd add to that, just so that everybody, I mean, in terms of one of the issues and one of the challenges around leasing and licensing and gaining new applications and amendments and all that is this quote unquote network review, the network partner review, which is all of those folks that we just talked about. And the reality is like I said in my presentation, that you're not gonna get there without understanding of the importance, and it sounds a little bit bureaucratic, but the importance of all these network partners. So we're trying to find a way for them to be engaged and aligned in a more efficient way, and hopefully that'll come out of the review.
Yeah, it's a unique balance for sure. And I guess each department has varying processes that aren't necessarily wound into, we'll say, the application process. So, you mentioned CFIA and at the processing facility, you also need a processor license from the department. And that's a separate division then within fisheries and aquaculture. But a big one for shellfish, I guess, to the question was that you sort of touched on, Tom, but it would be the Canadian Shellfish Sanitation Program, and that goes to the classification of waters within the province. That the main goal is for human health and safety, but it's Environment Canada, CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and DFO led. So it's a 3-partner federal program that speaks to water classification, and it is a complicated and onerous one as well. And we won't get into that one, but it's a specific one that is a challenge, and it's with when you're looking at growing shellfish within the province and where you can go. So I'll leave it at that for that question, but I'm sure we could discuss that one further, as most of these questions we could. But the last one is from Andrew. And what are the training and development programs to provide a skilled workforce to support economic development, expansion of aquaculture, and sustainable jobs in Cape Breton? So I guess I don't know if we want to start with Michael or Tom on those two. If you have any comments on Cape Breton.
As far as training, let me just bring that question up again so I read it properly. So as far as training and development programs, I had mentioned in my presentation through the Nova Scotia Community College, the Sea Farm Operations Certificate. I believe it's a 19-week course through Shelburne. I think that's an excellent place to start. Also looking, most definitely encourage university programs and certainly go down the road of looking at University St. Anne and then some more practical courses like your VSOP, Small Vessel Operators course, your MED, Marine Emergency Duties course. And then the other aspect of development would be certainly, I'll put a plug in for Cape Breton Bivalve. We are hiring. So we'll be hiring both mussel processing and mussel farmers as well. So nothing beats on the job experience, but definitely the course through NSCC. And if anybody has, certainly a background in marine biology or going down that road, but definitely there are courses and certainly on the job programs available. We're looking at one currently right now to place a student with another university institution to look at a seaweed hatchery. So certainly we're always looking at programs and projects that someone could gain some experience in.
Tom or Melissa?
I'd defer that to Melissa more than, but I think Michael covered it. There's some good information that he just shared, and I think obviously there's university courses. Dalhousie Truro campus has a lot of program development going on right now, so you can contact folks like Scott Jeffrey and Stephanie Colombo at Dal Truro. Mike talked about the Sea Farm Operations course, and there's loads of programs going on, and yeah, so I think he covered it.
I think he covered it well, so nothing to add. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. No, thanks. And I'd agree, there's definitely depends on where you want to go and what you want to do if you have that idea of interest. But the NSCC program, which, Melissa has run a couple courses through that. You know, I'll put in a plug for St. FX. That's where I started in the aquatic resources program, but that's a diverse program that covers varying aspects of resource management when it comes to aquatic resources, and aquaculture is included in that, but it looks at business aspects and different variables and that you want to look at. CBU up in Cape Breton, very heavily involved in research, and you know, Tom mentioned MSX. That MSX project is being run through CBU right now, right? So very interested in developing the industry up there, you know. And also you have Wrapup with one of our the largest fish farm operation for trout in the province for rainbow trout. So it's diverse, and depending on where you want to go, like Michael said, you got the University of St. Anne, who's heavily involved as well in varying aspects on the north and the south end of the province. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities, and I encourage you to reach out. You know, Tom's a great asset and has a lot of connections, as well as Melissa and Michael. And I think the Cape Breton Partnership's doing a great thing here in making connections for people as well, and that can lead to more. Like Melissa said, I think earlier, it's a small industry to get into, and once you start making some connections, the people are able to fan it out and point you in a direction if you have a specific question, or one that may be general to, you know, spark your interest. So hopefully that answered the question, I think, for Andrew, but I'll hand it back to you, Jeremy.
And thank you, Nathaniel, and I will promptly hand it over to Tyler.
Thanks so much. I'm Tyler Mathis, as Jeremy mentioned, President and CEO of the Cape Breton Partnership. And I get the pleasure of just thanking everyone for attending today. Huge thank you to Tom, Melissa, Mike, and Nathaniel. We're excited to be here. And I'll just remind folks our partnership with NSCC, our friends in the industry, and all of the folks that attended today. These things would not be successful without people's participation, great questions. And as Jeremy said, we'll work to ensure the questions are answered as best we can. And this video will be uploaded as well on our YouTube channel and in other places to make sure it's accessible, because ocean farming is an important part of our culture, both of our province and in our history of our province. And the future is just full of untapped potential in this industry right here. You know, and in order to promote growth, we need to learn about these regulations, identify ways we can make it easier, as continuous improvement is something I think all of our organizations strives for, and ensuring that environmental requirements and community concerns are met. Thanks again to the speakers today for sharing their vast knowledge and experience. And I'd like to thank you know, the people in the background, Jeremy and Carly and Kate in our comms department, as well as NSCC and their expertise in helping put this on, and our partners and friends, as Jeremy mentioned earlier, but it's worth mentioning again, communities of Membertou, Eskazoni, Wagmatcook, Wrapup, as well as the municipalities and counties of Richmond, Inverness, Victoria, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, and the town of Port Hawkesbury. Without these partnerships and the support from the province of Nova Scotia, through the Regional Enterprise Network, we wouldn't be able to put these on, and so we are in their debt, and we're great, really excited to be their partners. Don't forget to join us. We have 2 more sessions in the Ocean Farming Series, one on April 28th with Quality and Capacity, as well as on May 12th, Innovation and Readiness. And as the length of this session shows, there's great interest, lots of information, lots of engagement, and lots of questions. So we're excited to explore more of the many facets of this exciting industry through this series and through other things. As mentioned by the panelists, as well as Nathaniel, we're excited to discuss these through our network of economic development officers and the other partners in this industry and others as we work towards a thriving Cape Breton Unama'ki. So thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again.